And well, that story brings us to our discussion tonight, where we're talking about all matters by-elections. Of course, as you may already know, given what we have been highlighting throughout the weekend, of course, today, the parliamentary by-elections held yesterday in 7 constituencies across Kenya were marred by low voter turnout, violence, and bribing claims. And of course, we do know that the ruling United Democratic Alliance, that's UDA, and its ally Orange Democratic Movement in the broad-based government have clinched all parliamentary seats in the highly contested 27 November by-election, setting the tone, as it seems, ahead of the 2027 general election. And I do have 2 gentlemen to help us make sense of what happened at the by-elections. We did see a bit of violence, actually not a bit, a lot of it. And of course, just claims of voter bribery and much more. We have in studio Dismas Mokua, who is a political analyst, and of course also Daniel Juma, a political analyst as well. Gentlemen, thank you for making time. It's been a very busy week in Kenya, campaigning, and again, yesterday we are seeing a lot of activities during the voting. But I think the question that begs right now, the results we've seen being communicated by the IEBC, do they really paint a picture of what we are to expect in the 2027 general election? And I'll begin with you, Dismas.
Well, they don't necessarily paint a full picture, but it gives you an indication of how the 2027 body is going to look like. And maybe starting from the beginning, I think the person who has really suffered brand dilution is Mr. Rigathi Gachagua. You recall from the time he was impeached, he said he set out to make President Ruto a one-term president, and he said he was going to begin from Mount Kenya. So he pitched tent in Mount Kenya, and he wanted to use this by-election to teach President Ruto a lesson. Having failed to influence the outcome of the Mbeere North by-election, then even the people who were seated on the fence, waiting to see some signs and see whether or not they're going to be allied to him, right now they can decide to run on any political party, because it's now been confirmed that whether or not Rigathi Gachagua campaigns for you, there's no guarantee of an outcome either way. And I suspect there are members of the United Kenyan opposition, and a number of them probably in their rooms, they opened champagne bottles, because you know, Mr. Rigathi Gachagua has been intimidating all of them, saying I've got 7 million votes in my back pocket, and I'm going to slice them like a cake to anybody I so desire. So I suspect next time they show up for their meeting, the person who will be working with his head high is Dr. Matiang'i, because his candidates, all of them won from Nyamira, while all of the candidates preferred by Rigathi Gachagua got walloped. But you see the people from, the people who got a beating, they're seeking consolation, saying, guess what? We won by, we lost by a small margin of 1 vote or 2 votes. But when you're looking at the absolute numbers, to become president in Kenya is 50% plus 1. To become an MP is absolute majority. So essentially, those guys will be licking their wounds. And I also suspect another person whose movement has collapsed is Natembeya, George Natembeya. I saw the leaders in Western Kenya, most of them broke into a dance and song, especially the governor for Kakamega, telling Natembeya that in future you may want to exercise humility. When you come to a neighboring county, usikuje na kifua mbele. Because, he was hoping that his candidates were going to capture Malava and other seats, but he got walloped. But as usual, when people lose their seats or their candidates don't fail to capture their seats, they go back and say the elections were not free, fair, nor credible. But they have not placed evidence on the table in that direction. And finally, as we indicated as late as yesterday, we must condemn in the strongest terms possible any form of political violence, because political violence is unacceptable. No human being should die on account of their love or hate for a politician.
Daniel, what do you think? Do the current, the results that were announced by the IEBC perhaps paint a picture for us on what to expect come 2027?
Yes, so the results today revealed basically what we call in political opinion, voter behavior. So we were able to analyze and see, how the voters are likely to behave in 2027. And so it's a good research exercise, especially for the president, because now he knows that Gachagua can be beaten, or at least Gachagua will not get 100% votes of Central Province. And if anything, because you see the Central Province, the barrier was very close. The difference is very. So it says that the president now can rest easy, knowing that at least in the eastern, Mount Kenya, the Meru, he will get a higher percentage, if not, 50% of the vote, and that is very, very important for him to add on to his vote basket. But also, if you come to places like Homa Bay and in Ugunja, and we saw that the ODM and the broad-based people basically swept all the seats. And so that gives them confidence when they come to Nairobi to sit down with the president to negotiate for more seats, in future, or maybe for the deputy president position, which is, I don't know whether it's possible for them to get. But then they can say that, look, we were able to deliver, but no, the big problem that we have was the issue of voter apathy. In Ugunja, you saw the gentleman who won had around 8,000 votes, which was very, very minimal. And so I think the experts that Raila left, in Nyanza, the likes of my friend Opiyo Wandayi, they have to work extra hard to be able to convince the Luo Nyanza voters to come out in large numbers and be able to vote for the president. So this is the big thing. The voter apathy is a big issue, and we could see it. And Luo Nyanza voters, always come out for Raila Odinga. So at this point, after Raila has gone, it's going to be difficult to see what will motivate them to come out and vote. And for me, today, of course... Do you
think that perhaps then they have sort of lost confidence in the Orange Democratic Movement, especially now that we are seeing the likelihood of a split, there's infighting? So does this spell, like you mentioned, voter apathy? You're mentioning that Nyanza usually has residents who usually come out in large numbers to vote, and after Raila Odinga passed on, it seems like the trends have changed in terms of voters. Are you saying perhaps the residents, they are changing how they vote?
Let me not say that it's too early to say that they have left, or the Orange Democratic Movement. As of now, the ODM is still the strongest party in Luo Nyanza, and that was evident by, the Kasipol results. And of course, Uganda, where I come from, when I ran for Member of Parliament in 2019, for the first time, that is the only time that ODM was beaten in Luo Nyanza. So Ugandans are usually different people, so we think differently. But I think ODM is still, as long as they're able to up their game and stop speaking, the way they are in cross purpose, but most importantly, if they can convince the president or the broad-based in this arrangement to deliver certain things, like today you saw the roads that the president launched, the Roni Road. If we can see, for example, the roads from Kisumu to Busia, the road network is so bad, in that place. If you compare that to the road networks in Central Province, it's crazy. And so if these experts in the broad-based arrangement can utilize these last 1 year or 2 years to actually bring something tangible back home, then I think they will encourage the people to come out. They'll give the people a reason, to come out and vote in 2027.
I tend to question. We do know that the Gen Zs have been very vocal, especially on matters, abductions, and coming out and being vocal about issues pertaining to the country, the economy. But you feel that Gen Z's voice was heard, because we're talking about voter apathy. And I tend to believe that the youth bear the higher percentage of the population in Kenya. So did we see the voice of the Gen Zs come out in this by-election?
Unfortunately, Gen Zs in Kenya are not homogeneous. For instance, Gen Zs in Lavington, I've got different expectations to the Gen Zs in Karen, Gen Zs in my village in Mosocho, different expectations to Gen Zs in Elwak Mandera. And for some reason, when a normal Kenyan voter, rational, approaches the voting box, all of a sudden they become victims of their tribal considerations. That's when they remember that my name is Juma, I come from Ugenya, my name is Dismas Mukua, I come from Osocho, and then the Wetu syndrome checks in. But still there is room for them to register in big numbers in the IBC registration process so that they can influence the outcome of 2027. And they've got a unique opportunity to reset the baton in Kenya by voting for meritocratic leaders. But if they don't register as voters, then all the power will be limited to social media. And if your power is limited to social media and you don't go to the ballot, then the probability of causing real, tangible change is almost zero. But still, going back to those two by-elections, one can look at it from two perspectives. Number one, you can actually say that these by-elections were some sort of a referendum on the broad-based administration. Because for parliamentary seats, that is member of the National Assembly and the Senate, the UDA and ODM candidates had 100% score, meaning that voters, despite the poor turnout, have confidence in the broad-based administration. If voters felt that they're unhappy with the administration and Raila Odinga did not in fact leave ODM within this setup, then probably you would have different outcomes. So probably there's a reason for the so-called rebels or divergent groups within ODM to sit back and reflect, because if maybe the general ODM voters were unhappy with the broad-based administration, then they would have given these people a lesson and ODM would be bleeding. That is number one. Then number two, the critical seats in this election, it was not even Ugunja or Magarini, whatever it is. It was actually Mbere and Malava, because those are the two key constituencies for the next election. So that one reminds Kenyans of Musalia Mudavadi. You remember some time ago when he came with the earthquake moment, and he said at that stage, the person whose probability of becoming president was very high was then Deputy President William Samoei Ruto. At that stage, people rolled their eyes and said, wait a minute, Musalia Mudavadi, you actually believe that Ruto is going to become president? And he told them, yes. You remember the announcement made at Bomas. And he told the members of his community that from where I'm seated, this is going to be the next administration.
Or would you say that Malava and Mbere North constituencies are very key, or are very key as it seems in the by-election? What was the significance of these constituencies?
You know, Malava is a constituency in the Luhya community. And Luhya numbers cannot be taken for granted. When you're looking at the scoreboard for 2027, it's only a naive presidential candidate who would wish away the Luhya vote. And at the same time, it would be a very naive presidential candidate who would wish away, who would not consider how Mount Kenya is likely to behave. So when you're going to run for presidency, those are some of the critical numbers you must have in your matrix. When you're doing your permutations and combinations, when you're doing your sensitivity and scenario analysis, you must attempt to see how they're likely to vote. Because if you hold one community and you hold it tight, you hold it by the neck, and then you hold another by the neck, all you need to do is to get a third community. For some marginalized numbers like the Kisii Nation, their votes are considered to be swing states and at some stage almost immaterial. That is why the Luhya numbers are very critical. And then after the elections, again, you realize, Musalia Mudavadi said, now the Luhya community needs to move in total to UDA. So he folded his political party and he told them, now let's go through UDA. Now this campaign, had the UDA candidate lost, then people would have looked at Musalia Mudavadi and said, wait a minute, you are right during the last election, but this time round, you've missed the ball. So I suspect one of the people who are dancing to the bank literally is Musalia Mudavadi. But one may not say the same of Natembeya. So I don't know whether he's still in Kakamega or he has made his way to Trans Nzoia. And at the same time, Wetangula, you remember, he received a beating. Because I understand that the MCA is the preferred candidate for MCA in his ward back in the village was walloped by an independent candidate. So also for him, people may say that you've been the kingpin for this region for a long time. What happened to the position of the MCA in your ward? So that also brings in another complication. But overall, Kenyans should be worried about the poor voter turnout because if, say, in a particular electoral area, you've got 10,000 registered voters and only 1,000 people will show up, then outside IBC, people should start asking themselves, how is it that people do not turn out to vote? Is it that they don't place a premium in electing leaders? Or even if you elect leaders, they don't move the needle from a socioeconomic perspective?
Or maybe they don't understand the significance or the weight of the by-elections. And we might see, perhaps we might see a different voter turnout come 2027. Maybe right now, Kenyans, like you say, there's a lot of voter apathy. Daniel, I do know that many leaders, a couple of leaders, have come out saying that these by-elections were not fair and they were not peaceful. Among them, of course, Governor James Orengo talking about this particular matter earlier on. What are your thoughts about this? Were the by-elections, in your view, fair? And of course, we did see they were not peaceful, but then were they fair?
I think the by-elections were fairly fair, even though they were not peaceful. The violence, the loss of, there were no loss of lives, but the violence were very regrettable. Just like Disma says, you know, violence has no place in our democracy. We should, in this civilization, not be seeing, you know, the kind of things we saw happening, vehicles being burned, you know, vehicles being destroyed.
And journalists being barred from covering, taking pictures and filming in Berry North constituency.
That is regrettable. You know, so we, and I don't want to apportion blame, you know, to IBC per se, because this IBC that we still have, you know, they're actually still on probation. They're on probation. I don't think it's
Daniel, I tend to wonder. The IBC said that it was prepared for these by-elections. So if you are saying that they're new, you know, let's give them benefit of doubt and perhaps just give them an opportunity to prove themselves. But then again, the IBC was aware that there were by-elections to be held yesterday. You cannot say that it's because that the IBC is fairly new that some of these cases were there.
Absolutely.
Was there preparedness then?
Absolutely. So they did the best they could. But you have to know that, you know, no elections are perfect. No elections are perfect. And this being the first by-elections, elections that these commissioners are superintending, I did not expect them to do a perfect job, you know, because even for them, it is a learning moment. But what we want to see is what lessons do they get from these elections, and will this help them to tighten their belts and improve their game plan, you know, moving forward. To expect a perfect election, especially in a country like ours, is it's basically fallacy. You do not do that. Look at what's going on in other countries. Look at our neighbors, where, you know, the president got 97% of votes. At least, even though we may have these problems, but we are still a better example of a democracy that we can be able to showcase to other people in Africa. Look at Guinea-Bissau. Yesterday, the military just took power even before the votes were counted. And we do not wish to come to that. So as much as we had this violence, and of course we have to put some blame at the door of the security apparatus. As you know, the IBC do not control the security, so they have to work together with the Ministry of Internal Affairs to ensure that the peace is kept. And also intelligence. Intelligence must have shown the Ministry of Internal Security that there were going to be some violence, and so they had an opportunity to increase the number of policemen, that were put there to ensure that there is peace in these areas, especially Kasipul, which everyone know that Kasipul is going to be crazy. It's going to be a hotspot, and Malava, and so I think it's a learning moment, and so the Ministry of Internal Affairs and IBC, they must go, if they haven't already gone back to their boardrooms, to have this debriefing and learn from what happened, so that they start having a good preparation for 2027.
Dismas, I know across the constituencies there were reports of low voter turnout. We have talked about that, and of course saying perhaps that there was a bit of low voter apathy amongst the voters, and many of them not turning up at the polling stations. We saw President William Ruto earlier on claiming that this is probably the win across the wins that they were able to secure across the constituencies is a show of a vote of confidence for Ruto. But again, as we're saying, there was a low voter turnout. Does the elections, the by-elections that have just concluded and the results really paint a picture that is adequate enough to say that it shows a vote of confidence for Ruto?
Absolutely, because you see, for the Kenyan politician, right now they don't care about the process. Or what time did voters wake up in the morning? Was there political violence? They are looking at the scorecard. So President Ruto is saying that the broad-based had 6 candidates for National Assembly and Senate, and 6 candidates won. So as far as he's concerned, that is 100% success. And probability of passing any exam by 100%, even if you are Archimedes or Aristotle, is almost 0. So right, today what he's been doing is a victory lap all over town. And I'm sure that is the message he's going to run with till the general elections. I mean, there's a course in applied political science called Perception and Consequences Management. So as far as it's concerned, Mr. Rigathi Gachagua had come out and doing all manner of press-ups, lifting heavy weights and saying, I'm going to teach you a lesson, and the lesson is going to begin from Mount Kenya. So it occurs that Mr. Rigathi Gachagua was unable to cause any turbulence in Mount Kenya. It did not disrupt the voting patterns. So that one doesn't really bother President Ruto, that the margin was very small, because majority of Kenyans don't even know that. I mean, majority of Kenyans, actually, if you go outside here and you get 10 voters, ask them how was Mbeere North, they will tell you UDA won. Whether it was by 500 margins, who cares? But they won. In the Olympics, it's number 1, number 2, and number 3. If you don't win a medal, you are on your own. You did ask a very pertinent question about IBC. While the buck stops with IBC, we must also look as other players who should take responsibility and blame. That includes political parties. Like, for instance, ODM. If some members of your political party who are running for any election have been accused of political violence, what do you actually do? Do you have internal mechanisms to punish them? Or do you have to wait for IBC to impose a fine of $1 million? And we understand all these candidates are millionaires or billionaires, so $1 million, Bob, is nothing material. So how do you do that? So if you're not going to have all the people in the electoral delivery system taking responsibility, then we may be blaming IBC for no reason, because IBC on the material day is focused on ensuring that people vote and the ballots are counted.
So where were the gaps then? If it's not the IBC, then what really caused some of the cases we saw? Issues of violence, claims of voter bribery, journalists like in Bere North not being allowed to take pictures and filming at some point, and that meaning then we couldn't take pictures to at least ascertain some of the activities within the tallying center. I mean, if it's not the IBC, then who is it?
It's, you know, IBC is just one of the players. Like, for instance, if you get citizens stopping journalists from getting into a polling station or a tallying center, I mean, how does that fall within the space of IBC? It's citizens who are becoming rowdy. Now, if during an election day, one of the candidates...
But aren't there police officials? Then can we say perhaps the police officials then may not have adequately carried out their duties there to provide security and calm within those particular constituencies?
Well, again, I hold no position in the police service, but again, its probability of having policemen everywhere is almost zero. And the IG finds himself in a very complicated situation, because when he's got intelligence that you're likely to have violence in a particular electoral area, then he deploys so many policemen and armored personnel carrier. People sit back and say, wait a minute, IG, is this not a voter intimidation strategy? So whatever the IG does, he will be blamed. You've got intelligence, you deploy policemen, people will say, no. This is a securitization or militarization of the voting process. This is unacceptable. Now, you've got intelligence, there's going to be violence, you don't deploy, then you get these citizens stopping journalists, you get these politicians beating up people. I mean, you saw Justin Muturi yesterday running with a young man, and then people say, where were the cops? In my view, as we approach 2027, there is very good merit, and I've seen ILOG has come up with a report, but I think there's good merit in IBC initiating a conversation to increase the penalties, criminal penalties and pecuniary penalties around electoral violence, or even around anybody who breaks the law. In my view, I would even dare suggest that anybody who causes political violence, the penalties should be criminal, and maybe they should go behind bars for even 20 years. Because you've got registered voters who want to go and exercise their agency. Why would you cause political violence? Why would you ban their cars? Why would you make their lives uncomfortable? So in my view, and this is very urgent for Kimani Ichung'wah, the majority leader of the National Assembly, we need to review some pieces of legislation so that causing political violence should be treated in the same level as maybe even terrorism or even murder. Because if you don't do that, from what happened yesterday, some people have said this is going to be a best practice. These rich politicians who run can afford to set aside 50 million so that they'll be paying a penalty of $1 million for every time they breach the law. They pay $1 million, $1 million, $1 million. IBC and political parties should now summon guards and disqualify anybody associated with political violence. You remember that we used to watch Vioja Mahakamani. So we need funzo kwa wengine so that people realize that you cannot engage in political violence and go home. But if we don't do that, business as usual. And of course, there's the comparison which has been made, the way we vote in Kenya and other countries. Even people who are claiming their votes were going to be stolen yesterday. Again, it's unfortunate that a number of politicians of rank in Kenya are actually making these statements without providing evidence. Now, the moment they do that, the moment they engage in misinformation and disinformation, they reduce people's trust in IBC. Because you recall before the election, some members of the United Kenya opposition said there's evidence of voter bribery, ballot stuffing, but they did not offer critical directions. Where is this thing taking place? Because if you say, we have good evidence, there is a ballot stuffing, why can't you offer that evidence?
Daniel, what do you think about this? Because this Marcia says we can't always blame the IEBC, but I tend to question then, why were these things happening if then there was preparedness? Because I guess preparedness should not only cut across the IEBC, it should be, of course, on the police officials who will be providing security to those who are coming to vote, and the tallying process, and every other activity related to the by-elections. Daniel, where is the gap? Why are we seeing electoral violence?
I think still is a question about our political culture. You have to know that election management is actually, IEBC just one cog in elections. And like he says, the political parties, is an important player, and they have to do their part, right? But also the politicians, must do their part. There's somebody who told me, that for you to be successful in Kenyan politics, you must have, some, capacity for barbarism. If you are not able, if you're not a politician, if you're a politician who is gentlemanly and who is looking at the issues, you cannot have machetes on your boot. You can't succeed in Kenyan politics. I mean, that is how people know. Kenyan politics have for a long time been associated with the goonism, and you read, there's a story in the newspaper about goons and goonship and how politicians use this to intimidate rivals. So these things are there. We see them every other time. We see them, when it suits even sometimes government side, when it suits them, they use these goons and, so these things are there. So the responsibility of ensuring that we have a free, fair elections is, I think, it's the responsibility of everybody. But then, like you said, you have to know that for you to participate in an election, the election laws allows you to have agents in the polling station. So, and that's why I agree with him when he says that, those who are claiming that there was some malpractice, they need to produce evidence because, during the elections, when people are voting, you have your agents there, and then immediately, the counting starts, and your agents should be there, seeing how the counting is being done until the tallying is done, and the agents, move to the tallying center with the vote. So it is not easy if the agents, if everyone plays their role, it is actually not easy for elections to be stolen, or for someone to be disadvantaged, especially if you have your agents who have faith, who may have faith in. But unfortunately, the problem many of the politicians have is that, the politicians usually pay the agents of the, let's say if I paid my agents maybe 3,000 shillings, a clever guy will come and pay my agents 10,000 shillings and say, now you just keep quiet. This is for you to just keep quiet or just take your tea. And so, whenever these malpractices are going on, then they'll just close their eyes. So in that case, whom do you blame? You just blame your agents. So this is the problem. Lack of integrity, lack of ethics, you can't even trust, your own agents. And so it's a big problem. Yeah, what do you think?
I'd like to buttress this point that a good politician should actually train their agents. You remember during the last 2 presidential elections, insiders say part of the reason as to why Mr. Raila Odinga lost is that he did not have sufficient number of agents across the nation. And when he did in some parts, they were not trained. Because being an agent at an electoral process is not simply watching the queue. There are some things you're supposed to look at. Now, if you do not train those agents for them to be very curious and to suspect everybody coming in, people who are attempting to manipulate, then the voting process may be compromised as they watch. So you must train your agents. But however, also a call to the IG. He must investigate all these causes of political violence and make sure that these people are brought to book, and this thing must be publicized. So that in the next maybe 10 days, we need to see several people being arraigned on causing political violence. And it should not be sufficient just to arraign the they refer in his mother tongue, Julwedo, watu wa mkono, or kanda ya moko, the guys who did the actual work. They need to look at the transactions and find out who gave the order and who paid for this. Believe you me, you will not get a Kenyan young man or a woman waking up in the morning on election day to say, I'm going to burn that car, I'm going to burn that house, I'm going to take a rock and hurl it in the direction of Kaluma. There must be an incentive. So we need to establish that incentive. We are told that the IGN or the DCI, they've got very high capacity for investigations. So they can actually, even if they don't go through all these words, let them zoom in at a place called Kaspool and pick a few people. Let them zoom in Mbere and Malava, pick a few people. Because even conversations as late as yesterday were told that some of the politicians who are claiming that they're victims of political violence, in fact, they initiated the violence so that they can attract sympathy votes. So these things must be investigated.
I just want us to cut across to now ODM's dominance. There's been concerns within the party, some members saying they should be careful that ODM is not swallowed by the broad-based government. Do you think ODM is able to maintain its dominance, especially in the constituencies it has been holding this dominance come 2027? Do you think there might be a shift, especially with the emergence of concerns of a split?
I think ODM, and I was at the funeral of Raila Odinga, and I saw the president, saying that he will personally ensure that ODM is not split. And of course, you have to know that ODM is one of the parties that, actually the president is a founder member of ODM. And most of the people in the government, including Musalia Mudavadi, were once in ODM. And we also saw the president attending ODM's at 20 dinner and wearing ODM regalia and all that. So I think in terms of dominance, ODM is still, dominant, and it will maintain that at least for some time. I do not see any of the people within the ODM, even if they break away, I don't see them actually having the courage to do that, because it is not easy. It's very expensive to start and run a party. And right now it's almost too late, because 2027 is almost here. So at what point will they be popularizing this party if they haven't done so? You can see at least Rigiji, he already started, and so DCP is already gaining currency, and this, participating in this by-election actually was a branding exercise for them. So I think ODM will hold on, and you also have to know that in terms of budget, the political parties, the money that is given to the parties, ODM has a big chunk of that money, billions, actually billions still owed by the exchequer. So it's ODM and the UDA that have that money. And if anytime, because of their being the broad-based, it's very easy for them to influence the exchequer, and Badi is seated there to be able to allocate that money. And so they're going to use that money to ensure that they dominate. Look at the campaigns in Kasipol and in Ugunja. The branding was, was evident. The branding was evident. You could see that there is money here, there's money being poured here. So politics requires a lot of money, and you need a lot of money to actually win elections. And that also brings me to the question of voter bribery. People complain about voter bribery, but it looks like, the election laws is against it, but actually the IBC, they've never attempted to actually clamp down on voter bribery. It's like an open secret. When I was running in 2019, we raised this issue during a security meeting. And the gentleman that I was accusing said, look, we were basically giving bus fare, facilitation. The people came to our meetings, so we have to give them. And so then it was agreed that it was okay to do that. So think about the person who doesn't have that money to be able to do that. And some of these facilitation, the people who, of course, give 200 shillings, 100 shillings, but the others will give 1,000 shillings. And so for you to be respected, to be considered a serious politician, if you are, in Luo we call it Gonya. Gonya means release. So if you release people, it means you, after talking to us, now we are stuck. So you have to release us by giving us money. So if you are releasing people with 1,000 bob, then the word goes around that, wow, Leah is giving 1,000 bob. So if you come, when you call your meetings, campaign meetings, your meetings will always be full, because they know.
Isn't that a form of bribery? Because we also heard of cases where leaders were giving out sweets.
Yeah, it's a bribery. And we saw also, we saw this guy who was giving vegetables and tomatoes in Bere.
And Skuma Wiki.
Actually, it even goes beyond all these so-called gifts, which has been sanitized during the election day. If you drive through any town right now, you'll see governors images on big billboards.
Yeah.
I mean, projects funded by Alima, Mura, and Wanjiro by taxpayers' resources, you will see a governor's photo, governor's image. Now, for unsuspecting voters, they may actually think that this money is coming from the governor's pocket. You see MCA's photos everywhere. And I think a clever chap should go to court and this thing to be stopped, because people are campaigning using government resources. A governor says that nimewaletea, nimewapatia ECD. So people begin to wonder, people understand, but this guy is very rich. So that is something which must be done away with. But it raises a very critical issue about ODM. Now, ODM is going to become a very strong political party if and only if they do two things. You recall when they were in Mombasa, Winnie Odinga raised some critical issues about the need of having the NDC. Now, we understand Winnie Odinga is related to Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. And then the acting party leader, Dr. Oburu Odinga, said that Winnie mtoto yangu, we are going to have a conversation behind the tent. But this is a political party funded by taxpayers. So what are you telling me? Are you running ODM like a family business, a kiosk across the road? If they go on with that kind of thinking, then ODM members will bolt away. Because the D in ODM is supposed to mean democracy. So this democracy, is it only domiciled in the Jaramogi Oginga Odinga family, or anybody who is a member of ODM? Now, even if you're not a member of ODM, but you are a taxpayer, you still have interest in establishing, this guy is using my resources within ODM. So I found it unacceptable that Dr. Oburu Odinga and Winnie Odinga are behaving in a manner suggesting that ODM, one of the biggest political parties in Africa, is being treated like, this is something you're going to your living room while you're having uji and boiled maize, then you discuss over this thing, while the rest of Kenyans are outside in the gardens waiting for a white smoke. That is unacceptable. Number two, the probability does exist that President Ruto will run on ODM. He can easily tell people within the Kenya Kwanza that in fact all of us, apart from Wetangula, who are in ODM, so can we go back and achieve the noble intentions of ODM of taking over? And I suspect he'll face minimal resistance. Again, as a student of applied politics, on the flip side, it actually serves President Ruto's interest to have a very weak ODM. In fact, ODM that is disintegrated to ODM Asili, ODM Original, ODM people, it's very easy, because when you have a very strong ODM, it could easily be a threat to Ruto. They would, as we approach 2027, they may decide, wait a minute, in as much as Raila Odinga told us that, ametuacha kwa hii serikali, you remember every time Gladys Wanga gets an opportunity, when she sees the camera, she says, Raila Odinga alituacha hapa hivi. But no, they may get into that space and say, wait a minute, some key variables have changed, we want to go on our own. So in as much as President Ruto said that he will not sit back and see or watch ODM disintegrating, there's a very high probability that he could actually even engineer the collapse of ODM.
And on that note, thank you so much, Dismas. I know we have to come to a close of the discussion. Interesting insights there from you, Dismas and Daniel. I don't know if you have your final remarks regarding today's topic, the by-elections aftermath, in just 30 seconds. I'll begin with you, Daniel.
Yeah, so as you saw this, in these elections, President Ruto did not campaign personally. He just sent people to do that. And so today he was celebrating the results. So that tells you that these election results has left him in a strong position, to claim victory and to claim that the voter behavior is actually on his side. And he will ride on that, to be able to whip the broad-based government together and, claim early victory, as we go towards 2027. And then most important, the fact that this election was very, very tight also gives him an opportunity to go back to the drawing board and be able to fill in the gaps. And then he will be able to have an easy run. Right now, I don't think he has a very strong opposition yet.
Let's hear from you, Dismas. 30 seconds.
The second, You see now, I said during the next meeting for the United Kenya opposition, Rigathi Gachagua will walk in a very humble man with putting on a humility jacket. And now Dr. Matiang'i and Kalonzo Musyoka will need to recraft their 2027 strategy without having Gachagua in mind, because he has demonstrated without doubt that he cannot disrupt the political space in Mount Kenya. And finally, Kenyans must develop an insatiable appetite for meritocracy if they want their life to change. If you keep on electing thugs, criminals, and funny people, they do not sit back under a mango tree and expect miracles.
Thank you. Dismas Mukua, thank you for making time, political analyst, and of course also Daniel Jume, political analyst. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for making time. Wonderful insights. You have been able to give us an understanding of what is happening, the political landscape in Kenya, the shaping of alignments, and of course events relating to the by-election that just concluded. Well, my name is Leangari, and my sign language interpreter has been Pretty Janet. We do appreciate your company until this very moment, and we ask you to continue watching KTN, and thank you for keeping with us until this very moment. Have a good night and God bless.